Well, the Competition Bureau here in Canada is sure keeping busy recently. In the video today, I'm going to look at two big investigations that they've launched. One is against the real estate industry, the other against Canada's major airlines. I want to start with the real estate investigation, and in today's video, I'm going to go into some depth about the industry as a whole and update you on the housing situation here in Canada. Now, just FYI, if you're not subscribed to our Pulse newsletter, we did talk about these exact issues in this past weekend's edition. I will put a link here so you can go and check that out for yourself. While you're there, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss out. Now, the Competition Bureau just got a court order in order to dig into the Canadian Real Estate Associations, known as CREA, into their practices. And this could be a big deal if anyone wants to be buying or selling a home. They are looking at whether CREA's commission rules are making it harder for buyers' realtors to offer lower commission, or whether it stifles competition in other ways as well. And in short here, what they're trying to do is they're trying to figure out if these rules are rigging the game. For potential home buyers, it is really tough not to wonder if all this competition talk will translate into actual savings, or if it's just more noise. We've been talking about this type of thing for many, many years. Now, CREA's rules have always raised some eyebrows, especially when they come to commissions. Right now, MLS listings have to include an offer for the buyer's agent's commission that's usually paid by the seller's agent. Now, according to the Bureau, this setup, this arrangement might discourage agents from lowering their fees. Since buyers aren't paying their agents directly, they may not choose them based on the commission rates. Now, CREA Chair James Mabey, he says that its rules and policies are pro-competitive and pro-consumer, but not everyone is so convinced on that. The Bureau is suspicious that the agents may be steering their buyers away from homes with lower than average commissions. If that's true, obviously, it could make it harder for sellers to compete unless they're willing to shell out more cash. The Bureau is also questioning CREA's new cooperation policy, which kicked in earlier this year. And in this, the rule requires listings to be added to the MLS system within 3 days of being publicly marketed. That sounds pretty straightforward. Doesn't sound nefarious, but the Bureau thinks that it might be giving larger brokerages an unfair advantage because they can market properties to bigger networks. It could also put a squeeze, they say, on alternative listing services. We're seeing more and more of those these days that offer more privacy or different kinds of inventory. And if smaller players get pushed out, we lose the variety in the market, which, let's face it, benefits no one except for the big guys. Now, real estate is one of the biggest expenses that most of us will ever face in our lives. In my view, any change that could put a little more power back into the hands of the buyers is certainly worth exploring. In my second real estate related story today, if you are renewing your mortgage soon, you're probably stressing or possibly stressing about a big jump in your monthly payments. There is some good news now. The so-called mortgage renewal cliffs that we've probably heard so much about, a lot of people are saying those might turn into more of a hill than so much a cliff. The Bank of Canada probably heard they're likely to cut rates faster and deeper than we expected, and economists are now predicting that rates could fall to 3% or even lower by next summer, down from the current rate of 4.25%. That obviously would make renewing your mortgage a lot less painful. Now, Royce Mendez, he's the managing director and head of macro strategy at Desjardins Security, and he says, now that we're in the midst of a relatively rapid rate cutting cycle, we believe mortgage renewals will be much more manageable. Now, of course, manageable, that doesn't necessarily mean cheap. As an example that he gave in a piece he did, he said, let's say that you're renewing a 5-year fixed rate mortgage, let's say next July. Well, in one example Mendez showed, you see looking at a new payment of $2,655, that was up from $2,217, so a jump of $438 a month. So it's not great, but it sure could have been worse if we hadn't seen rates starting to come down the way they have been. Now, if you have a variable rate mortgage, you should brace yourself for an even bumpier ride. And that might sound a little bit counterintuitive. You see rates coming down, you think with a variable rate that it would be better. But hear me out on this. Variable rate mortgages, they track the Bank of Canada's rates, but in most cases, even if the rate goes up, your payment stays the same. So over the last few years, we've seen that scenario. Now, you could have increased your payment. A lot of people didn't though. They just didn't have the cash flow to go. So if you kept the same payments, then rates went up, let's say starting in 2022, 2023, more of your payment, same payment, was going to make interest payments, less was paying down the principal. Now, if that is your situation, according to Mendez, you might see payments shoot up as high as 42% when it comes time to renew. So yes, the rate cuts are nice, but they're not going to be a magic bullet for everyone out there. I would argue, in fact, that it is time now for homeowners. If you have variable rates, you got to start planning rather than just sort of crossing your fingers and hoping for the best case scenario. Good news is you do have some options out there. If you have a mortgage coming due, say next year, talk to a mortgage broker, talk to your bank about your refinancing options now, possibly making a lump sum payment to try and get things better under control. Investing is very personal, whether you're just starting out or whether you've been at this for years. Your financial goals are unique to you. Maybe you are focused on diversifying your portfolio. Perhaps you're just seeking a strategy that aligns with your values, like socially responsible investing. Well, BMO Exchange Traded Funds offers solutions that are tailored to fit where you are in life and where you want to go. With BMO Global Asset Management's experienced portfolio managers at the helm, you're not just buying an ETF, you are gaining access to solutions that can help you build your future. This is more than just investing. It's about making your money work for the things that matter to you the most. Discover how BMO ETFs can help you achieve what is important to you. Visit bmogam.com. That's BMOGAM.com. Today, you can find a direct link in the description of this video. Now, my last story on the topic of real estate today is, yes, we are seeing interest rates coming down, but that doesn't mean that owning a home in Canada is going to be easy, and it still might be a distant dream for a lot of Canadians. Even though we've seen the Bank of Canada rates come down, we're expecting more rate cuts in the coming months. A lot of economists are saying that affordability isn't improving fast enough to make any real difference. It is also a huge political issue, and it's one that's been hurting Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's popularity. We have an election coming up in the next year or so, maybe even sooner. The lack of affordable housing could be front and center in that debate. So here's the problem. House prices, interest rates, income levels, they're just not aligning right now. We have seen house prices go up more than 30% since April of 2020. Even though mortgage rates have been coming down, they're still sitting today at around 4.75%. Now, Robert Hogue, he's the assistant chief economist at RBC. He says, for the majority of potential buyers who are on the sidelines, if it means $50 or even $100 less a month, thanks to the lower interest rates, it's still unaffordable. When you look at cities like Toronto and Vancouver, the situation is even worse there. And this is leaving a ton of potential buyers either renting or just waiting this out. The reality is that even with interest rate cuts, mortgage rates are still going to be about 40% higher than they were pre-pandemic. I don't know about your situation, but overall, if we look at things in general, real household income hasn't grown enough to keep up with that pace. If you do the math on this, for affordability to reach pre-pandemic levels, house prices would need to drop by at least 10% from where they are today, and mortgage rates would have to fall by about half. So not impossible, but I sure wouldn't be placing any bets on that happening. See, it feels like we're fighting an uphill battle when it comes to home ownership in this market here. To make things even trickier, the federal government, you've probably seen on this channel here, if you're a regular watcher, that they've just changed the mortgage rules. This will allow 30-year amortizations for first-time buyers for new builds. And the idea here is to lower the monthly payments, but there are a lot of people, myself included, who argue that it could backfire by boosting housing demand, raising prices even higher. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, she disagrees with that. She says that it will encourage more home construction to meet demand. I can see both sides to this argument here, but I can't help but wonder, will this really make buying a home easier or just keep pushing the dream further out of reach? I think the second scenario is probably the more likely. I want to finish off today's video with some more news from the Competition Bureau. The Bureau, in this case, they've gotten court orders now to compel Air Canada and WestJet to hand over some detailed market information as part of an ongoing study into airline competition. This move is a pretty big deal in my opinion because it is the first time that the Bureau is using these new powers to dig into the industry data. They want to know, in this case, more about things like barriers to entry, performance metrics, and agreements with airports. To be honest, most of us are just hoping that this type of thing would lead to cheaper flights and, more importantly, better service in the long run. In fact, that is the question in this week's poll question. Should the focus be on promoting competition in the airline industry to lower prices, or should efforts be made to improve service quality first? The results so far are pretty much even on that. There's some very interesting commentary as well. You can weigh in on that question by visiting the Pulse website. Now, the Bureau's market study, this started in July. It's looking into the state of competition among Canadian airlines, which, let's face it, is pretty slim. Together, Air Canada, WestJet, they control about 3/4 of the market last year. That makes it pretty hard for new players to break in. Now, Competition Commissioner Matthew Boswell, he said, many Canadians are frustrated by the cost and quality of air travel. If that's not an understatement, I don't know what is. To give you a sense of how bad it's gotten, about 1/3 of all flights were delayed last year. That is worse than even the pre-pandemic year of 2019. It's important to note here that the court orders aren't about investigating any specific wrongdoing right now, but the Bureau did make it clear if they find evidence of any laws being broken, they are prepared to take action there. I, for one, agree that it would be a welcome change if it means that the airlines are held more accountable for delays, the crazy prices, the nickel and diming that we're seeing today. So what's next? Well, the Bureau is looking to identify these roadblocks that prevent competition, find ways to give travelers better option. They're also looking for input from Canadians. The number of complaints have reached, catch this, 78,000 complaints outstanding today. It's now taking up to 2 years with the Canadian Transportation Agency to get a resolution there. Clearly, the frustration is real out there. Any recommendations coming out of this study, in my opinion at least, would be very welcomed. Again, don't forget to vote in this week's poll question. As always, I thank you for watching, and we'll see you on Wednesday.